There were country singers in the 1960s that every American with a radio knew by heart. Every farmhouse in Tennessee, every honky-tonk in Texas. They sold millions of records. They filled the Grand Ole Opry every Saturday night. But when country music decided who its legends would be, most of them were left off the list. Here's 25 more country singers every American knew before the world moved on. Subscribe before we start so you don't miss any of our lookbacks. Number 25, George Morgan. When EddyArnold left the Grand Ole Opry in 1948, the show needed a smooth-voiced crooner to replace him, and they found one in a young man named George Morgan. He stepped into that spot without even having a hit record yet. Then he recorded a song he had written himself, humming the melody along to his car engine on the way to a radio job, and it changed everything. That song was Candy Kisses, and in 1949 it went to number 1 and stayed there for 3 weeks, selling over 1 million copies. For a stretch that year, George Morgan had so many hits that he accounted for half the country top 10 all by himself. They called him the Candy Kid, and he had one of the smoothest tenor voices country music ever produced. He stayed a beloved member of the Opry for 27 years, until his death in 1975. But that gorgeous voice slowly faded from the public memory. Today, many people only know the name Morgan because of his daughter, the star Lorrie Morgan, never realizing her father was once one of the biggest voices in the country. Number 24, Warner Mack. Warner Mack was a hard luck story with a hard country voice. He had the talent to be a huge star, but bad timing and bad luck seemed to follow him everywhere. He even got his stage name by accident when a record label misprinted his real name, Warner McPherson, on his very first single, and he just decided to keep it. In the mid-1960s, Warner Mack finally broke through. His 1965 record, The Bridge Washed Out, went all the way to number 1, and he followed it with a string of hits, a genuine country star with a warm, easygoing sound. But a serious car accident and other setbacks kept interrupting his momentum, and he was never quite able to build on that peak. As the years went by, the hits stopped coming, and Warner Mack slipped quietly out of the spotlight. The man who once topped the charts became one of those names that only the most dedicated country fans still remember, a solid, likable star that time simply passed by. Number 23, Charley Pride. In 1966, at the absolute height of the civil rights struggle, an event happened in country music that many thought was impossible. A black man from the cotton fields of Mississippi became one of the biggest stars the genre had ever seen. His name was Charley Pride, and he did it with a warm, rich baritone that was pure country to the bone. At first, his label was so nervous about how the South would react that they released his early singles with no photograph, letting the audience fall in love with the voice before they knew the face. And fall in love? They did. Charley Pride became a massive star, scoring dozens of number 1s like Kissin' Angel Good Mornin', and becoming the biggest star RCA had since Elvis Presley himself. He broke a barrier that had stood since the beginning of country music, and did it with grace and quiet dignity in the face of real hostility. He became one of the very few black members ever inducted into the Grand Ole Opry, a genuine pioneer and a superstar every fan of that era knew by heart. Number 22, Sonny James. They called him the Southern Gentleman, and Sonny James earned the name with his smooth manners and even smoother voice. He first hit it big in 1957 with Young Love, a gentle ballad that shot all the way to number 1 on both the country and the pop charts, making him one of the earliest country stars to cross fully into the mainstream. But his greatest run came in the mid-1960s and early 70s, when Sonny James did something almost unbelievable. He scored 16 number 1 country hits in a row, one after another, a streak of dominance that almost no artist in history has ever matched. Song after song, he sat at the very top of the charts, a machine for making warm, romantic, beautifully sung hits. And yet, despite that staggering run of 16 straight number 1s, his name is rarely mentioned today alongside the legends of his era. The Southern Gentleman, one of the most successful chart artists of his generation, has quietly slipped from the story. Number 21, Hank Locklin. Hank Locklin had a high, pure, tender tenor voice that could break your heart, and in 1960 he used it to record one of the most beloved country songs of the era. It was called "Please Help Me, I'm Falling," a song about a man fighting the temptation to fall for someone he shouldn't, and it was an absolute phenomenon. The record spent 14 weeks at number 1 on the country chart, one of the longest runs of the entire decade, and it crossed over to become a big pop hit as well. That soaring, pleading voice was suddenly everywhere, and Hank Locklin was a major star. He was also a proud, long-serving member of the GrandOleOpry, and his gentle, Irish-flavored ballads made him especially beloved overseas, in Ireland in particular, where he was treated like royalty. But back home, the enormous fame of that record slowly faded. Hank Locklin kept performing for decades, but never again reached that peak, and the public gradually forgot the man behind one of 1960's biggest records. Number 20, Johnny Horton. Johnny Horton had one of the most exciting careers in country music, and one of the most tragic endings. They called him the singing fisherman because he loved to fish nearly as much as he loved to sing. He started out as a pure honky-tonk singer, and his 1956 record, Honky Tonk Man, is one of the greatest barroom anthems ever cut. Then Johnny Horton found a whole second life singing historical saga songs, big dramatic story records about moments in history. In 1959, the Battle of New Orleans became one of the biggest hits of the entire decade, topping both the country and pop charts and winning a Grammy. He followed it with more saga hits, and he was at the absolute peak of his fame, and then it ended in an instant. In November of 1960, driving home from a show, Johnny Horton was killed when a drunk driver struck his car head-on. He was 35. In a haunting twist, his final show had been at the same Texas honky-tonk where Hank Williams played one of his last. The singing fisherman was gone at the height of his powers. Number 19, Bobby Bare. Bobby Bare brought a thoughtful, folky, storytelling sensibility to country music that set him apart from everyone around him. He had a warm, weathered, everyman voice, and he used it to tell the stories of working people, drifters, and homesick country boys who had moved to the big city looking for something better. His breakthrough came in 1963 with Detroit City, a powerful, aching song about a southern man working in a northern factory and longing to go home. It won a Grammy and became a signature song of the era. He followed it with other hits like 500 Miles Away from Home, cementing his reputation as one of country music's finest interpreters of a great song. Bobby Bare was an artist's artist, respected by everyone, a man with impeccable taste who later championed young songwriters like Shel Silverstein. But despite decades of fine work, his name never reached the household level of the biggest stars, a beloved figure to those in the know and forgotten by almost everybody else. Number 18, Little Jimmy Dickens. He stood barely 4'11", but Little Jimmy Dickens was one of the biggest personalities country music ever had. With his oversized rhinestone suits and his mile-wide grin, he was a beloved showman, but he was also a serious talent with a powerful voice and impeccable timing. He is best remembered for his novelty hits, especially the 1965 smash May the Bird of Paradise Fly Up Your Nose, a goofy, unforgettable song that went to number 1 and crossed over to the pop charts. But there was far more to him than comedy. He was a masterful honky-tonk singer, a member of the GrandOleOpry for an astonishing 70 years, one of the longest tenures in its entire history. He was a bridge to the earliest days of the Opry, a link back to Hank Williams himself, who gave him his nickname, Tater. But to the wider world, the fame of his big novelty hits faded, and this pint-sized giant became a half-forgotten name from a bygone era. Number 17, Del Reeves. Del Reeves was one of the most entertaining performers in country music, a natural showman with a talent for impressions and comedy that made him a favorite on television variety shows. But he could really sing, and in the 1960s he strung together a run of hits that made him a genuine star. His biggest came in 1965, a catchy truck driving anthem called Girl on the Billboard, which went straight to number one and became one of the definitive trucker songs of the era. He followed it with more hits and became a beloved member of the Grand Ole Opry, known for his energetic stage show and his warm connection with an audience. But the hits eventually slowed and the spotlight moved to younger stars. The man who sang Girl on the Billboard and lit up the Opry stage for years gradually slipped out of the national conversation, unknown to the generations who came after. Number 16, Jim Ed Brown. Jim Ed Brown had a smooth, warm, resonant voice that first found fame as part of a family act. Along with his sisters, he formed the group The Browns, and in 1959 they recorded one of the most hauntingly beautiful records of the era, a song called The Three Bells. It went to number one on both the country and pop charts and became an international sensation with its gorgeous, gentle harmonies. When the group wound down, Jim Ed Brown launched a successful solo career, scoring hits through the 1960s and 70s with that rich, easygoing baritone. He later found even more success singing duets with Helen Cornelius, and he became a warm, familiar presence as a television and radio host, beloved for his gentlemanly charm. But like so many on this list, the towering fame of his biggest hits slowly faded with the years. The voice behind one of the most beautiful records of the 1950s became a name that fewer and fewer people could place. Number 15, Wanda Jackson. Wanda Jackson was a genuine trailblazer, a woman who did something almost unheard of in the 1950s. She rocked. They called her the Queen of Rockabilly, and with a growling, fierce, powerful voice, she recorded some of the wildest, most exciting records any woman made in that era, songs like Fujiyama Mama and Let's Have a Party. She toured with a young Elvis Presley who encouraged her to try the new rock and roll sound, and she blazed a trail for female performers that almost nobody else was walking. But Wanda Jackson was also a tremendous country singer, and through the 1960s she scored a string of country hits like Right or Wrong and In the Middle of a Heartache, showing off a voice that could be tender as easily as it could be tough. But as the decades passed, her pioneering role was slowly forgotten by the mainstream. The Queen of Rockabilly, one of the boldest voices of her generation, faded from a fame she had genuinely earned, remembered fully only by the fans who never let her go. Number 14, Dottie West. Dottie West was one of the most important women in the history of country music, a gifted singer and a groundbreaking songwriter at a time when women were rarely allowed to be either. She grew up in genuine poverty in rural Tennessee, and she poured all of that hard-earned emotion into her music. In 1964, she made history. Her song, Here Comes My Baby, which she co-wrote herself, became a huge hit and won her a Grammy, making Dottie West the first woman ever to win a Grammy for a country song. That warm, emotional voice and her gift for songwriting made her a star, and she mentored younger singers, becoming especially close with a young Patsy Cline before Patsy's death. Dottie West stayed a star for years, even finding a new wave of fame in the late 70s with a series of hit duets. But her later life was marked by financial ruin and a tragic car accident that took her life. And this pioneering woman, the first of her kind to win that Grammy, has faded far more than her contribution deserves. Number 13, Bobby Helms. Bobby Helms had one of the strangest careers on this list because he recorded a song so famous you have almost certainly heard it dozens of times without ever knowing his name. In 1957, this young singer from Indiana recorded Jingle Bell Rock, which became one of the most played Christmas songs ever recorded. Every December, all around the world, Bobby Helms is singing and hardly anyone knows it. But there was much more to him than that one immortal record. That same year, 1957, Bobby Helms was a genuine country star. He scored a massive number one country hit with Fraulein and followed it with another huge hit, My Special Angel, which also topped the country chart and crossed over into the pop top 10. For a brief, shining moment, he was one of the hottest young singers in America. But that moment passed quickly. The hits dried up almost as fast as they had come, and Bobby Helms spent the rest of his career as an oldies act, watching his early stardom fade. It is one of the great ironies in music. His voice fills the airwaves every Christmas, one of the most heard singers alive, and the man himself became almost completely forgotten. Number 12, Connie Smith. When Connie Smith first walked into a recording studio in 1964, almost nobody had heard of her. When she walked out, country music had a new star. Her very first single, a heartbroken ballad called Once a Day, did something no debut single by a female country artist had ever done. It went straight to number 1 and stayed there for 8 straight weeks. That was unheard of. Connie Smith arrived fully formed, a superstar from her very first record. Dolly Parton once said there were only 3 real female singers, Barbra Streisand, Linda Ronstadt, and Connie Smith, and the rest were just pretending. That is how respected that voice was. But at the height of her fame, Connie Smith made a choice. She became deeply devoted to her faith and family and stepped back from the grind of stardom by her own decision. That choice and the passing of time meant one of the greatest voices in country history slowly slipped from the spotlight, revered by other singers but forgotten by much of the public. Number 11, Mel Tillis. Mel Tillis was living proof that a so-called flaw could become a person's greatest strength. Off stage, when he spoke, Mel Tillis had a pronounced stutter, something that had troubled him since childhood. But the moment he began to sing, the stutter vanished completely, and out came one of the warmest, most reliable voices in country music. He scored a long string of hits through the 60s and 70s, but may have been an even greater songwriter. He wrote, "Ruby, Don't Take Your Love to Town," the haunting story of a paralyzed war veteran, along with hits for Kenny Rogers and countless others. And rather than hide his stutter, Mel Tillis turned it into a beloved part of his charm, becoming a hugely popular television guest and comedian. For decades, Mel Tillis was one of the most famous and well-liked entertainers in country music. But as the generations turned over, that warm voice slowly faded from the spotlight, and one of the genre's most gifted and beloved figures became a name the younger crowd no longer knows. Number 10, Charlie Walker. Charlie Walker was one of the great honky-tonk singers, a Texan with a smooth, easy voice who also happened to be one of the most popular country disc jockeys in the entire country. He knew the music from both sides of the microphone, and in 1958 he stepped up and recorded a song that became an instant classic. That song was Pick Me Up on Your Way Down, a perfect piece of honky-tonk heartache written by a young Harlan Howard. It became a massive number 1 hit and established Charlie Walker as a real star, with a voice tailor-made for beer joint ballads and Saturday night dance floors. He became a beloved member of the GrandOleOpry, and he kept the traditional honky-tonk sound alive through decades of changing tastes. Charlie Walker was also a legendary golfer, a genuine character with talent to spare. But like so many pure honky-tonk singers on this list, the sound he loved fell out of fashion, and the world moved on. The man who sang one of the great honky-tonk standards became a name known mostly to the older fans who danced to it. Number 9, Roger Miller. Roger Miller was maybe the most purely original talent country music ever produced. A restless, hilarious, brilliant man whose mind seemed to work faster than everyone else's. He had struggled for years in Nashville, writing songs and playing in bands, until suddenly, in the mid-1960s, he exploded into one of the biggest stars in the entire world. His songs were unlike anyone else's, quirky, witty, and unforgettable. Dang Me and Chug-a-Lug showed off his goofy genius, and then, in 1965, he recorded King of the Road, the tale of a happy hobo riding the rails, and it became a worldwide phenomenon. That one song alone won 5 Grammy Awards. In that single mid-60s stretch, Roger Miller won 11 Grammys, a staggering, almost unbelievable haul. He was everywhere, even hosting his own network variety show. But Roger Miller burned bright and fast, and the peak of the mid-60s did not last. Later generations came to know King of the Road as a timeless classic while forgetting the wild, brilliant man who created it, the country superstar himself fading from the fame his genius had earned. Number 8, Wynn Stewart. Wynn Stewart was one of the true architects of the Bakersfield sound, that hard, bright, electric California style that pushed back against the smooth productions coming out of Nashville. Before Buck Owens and Merle Haggard made that sound famous around the world, Wynn Stewart was out west building it, and both of those legends looked up to him. A young Merle Haggard actually played bass in Wynn Stewart's band before Merle became a star, and Wynn helped launch other careers as well. His 1960 record, Wishful Thinking, was a big hit, a perfect example of that West Coast country sound with the vocal way out front. He had the talent, the sound, and the influence to become a major, lasting star in his own right. But somehow the fame that came to the men he inspired never came to Wynn Stewart himself. The spotlight always landed on his students instead. The architect got forgotten while the house he helped build made others legends, and a genuine pioneer whose fingerprints are all over modern country music became one of its most unjustly forgotten figures. Number 7, Jan Howard. Jan Howard lived a life as hard and dramatic as any song she ever sang. Before she was ever a star, she was the voice on the demo recordings her songwriter husband used to pitch his songs, and it was Jan Howard who sang the very first version of I Fall to Pieces, the song that would make Patsy Cline immortal. But she had a powerful voice of her own, and soon she stepped out of the shadows and into her own spotlight. Her signature hit came in 1966, a strong-willed record called Evil on Your Mind, and it made her a star. She racked up 20 hits on the country charts and became a beloved fixture of the Grand Ole Opry, later scoring a #1 duet with Bill Anderson called For Loving You. She was a tough, plain-spoken woman who sang like she meant every word, but her life was shadowed by real heartbreak, a bitter divorce, and the loss of a son in Vietnam. Through it all, she kept singing, a proud Opry member for nearly 50 years. Yet the fame of her hit-making years faded, and the woman who first gave voice to one of country's most famous songs became a name few outside the Opry faithful still remember. Number 6, Merle Haggard. Merle Haggard lived the hard country life before he ever sang about it. As a young man, he did real time in San Quentin prison, and it was there, watching Johnny Cash perform for the inmates, that he decided to turn his life around through music. What followed was one of the greatest careers country music has ever seen. They called him the Hag, and he wrote and sang with a hard, honest authority that came straight from a life of genuine struggle. He was the greatest disciple of Lefty Frizzell, and he built on that foundation to become a master. His songs, Mama Tried, Sing Me Back Home, and Okie from Muskogee, were the voice of the working man, of prison and poverty and hard-won pride, and he racked up dozens of #1 hits. Merle Haggard is not fully forgotten. He is too towering for that. But as the years pass, fewer young people know just how enormous he was, one of the 2 or 3 greatest artists in the history of the genre. The man who defined outlaw country before there was a name for it is slowly becoming a name in a history book, when he should be a household word forever. Number 5, Loretta Lynn. The story of Loretta Lynn is one of the most remarkable in all of American music. She was a coal miner's daughter from Butcher Holler, Kentucky, married as a young teenager and a mother of 4 before she was 20. And out of that hard life, she built herself into one of the most important and beloved country singers who ever lived, writing her own songs about the real lives of working-class women in a way nobody ever had. She sang the truth without apology, and it made her the most banned woman in country music. Songs like Don't Come Home a-Drinkin', Fist City, and The Pill got pulled from radio for being too honest about a woman's life, and every single time her audience made them hits anyway. She stood up for women who had no voice, and they loved her fiercely for it. Loretta Lynn is a legend, no question, but even she has faded more than she should have from younger America. The coal miner's daughter who changed what a woman was allowed to say in a country song, whose life became an Oscar-winning film, deserves to be remembered as one of the bravest and most important voices the genre ever produced. Number 4, George Jones. Ask almost any country singer alive who the greatest of them all was, and you will hear the same answer again and again. George Jones. They called him the Possum, and he possessed a voice of such impossible expression and control that legends from Frank Sinatra to Waylon Jennings stood in awe of him. If we all could sing like we wanted to, Waylon once sang, we would all sound like George Jones. He started as a hard honky-tonk singer in the 1950s and never stopped, scoring number ones in 5 straight decades. His 1980 masterpiece, He Stopped Loving Her Today, is regularly called the single greatest country song ever recorded. And George Jones lived every bit of the heartbreak he sang, battling an addiction so severe his wife once hid the car keys, so he famously drove a lawnmower all the way to the bar. Through all of it, that voice never failed him. George Jones was, by wide agreement, the finest singer country music ever produced. And even the greatest of them all spent his entire life idolizing one man above all others, his hero, the ghost who sits at the very top of this list. Number 3, Patsy Cline. Patsy Cline had the greatest voice country music has ever produced, and she was taken from the world far too soon. She was fearless, funny, and tough as nails, a woman who fought her way to the top of a business that did not want to make room for her, and once she got there, nobody could deny that voice. It was rich, powerful, aching, and utterly in control. Her records are immortal. Walking After Midnight, Crazy, She's Got You, I Fall to Pieces, each one a masterclass in singing pure emotion. She was crossing over into massive mainstream stardom, poised to become one of the biggest stars in all of American music, a woman who kicked open doors for every female singer who followed her. And then, in 1963, at just 30, Patsy Cline was killed in a plane crash. The loss was staggering, one of the great what-if stories in all of music. But the recordings she left behind made sure that voice, the finest country music ever had, would live forever, even as the woman herself became, to many, a name attached to a tragedy rather than the towering talent she truly was. Number 2, Bill Monroe. Bill Monroe did not just play a style of music, he invented one. They called him the father of bluegrass, and that is not a nickname, it is a literal fact. The high, lonesome sound of bluegrass, the breakneck mandolin, the soaring tenor, all of it sprang from the mind of this one stern, brilliant man from Kentucky. His band, the Bluegrass Boys, gave the entire genre its name, and passing through it were future legends like Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs. His Blue Moon of Kentucky was so powerful that a young Elvis Presley chose it for one of his first recordings, helping launch rock and roll itself. Bill Monroe was a fixture of the Grand Ole Opry for more than 50 years. He created an entire branch of American music from scratch, one still played and loved all over the world. And yet, to the average American today, the father of bluegrass is an unknown name. The man who invented a genre whose reach touched everyone from Elvis Presley to modern country, faded quietly into the very history he single-handedly created. Number 1, Hank Williams. Here he is, the ghost that every singer on this list and the last one was chasing. Hank Williams is the founding father of it all, the man who took country music and turned it into something eternal, and he did it in a career that lasted only about 6 years before it was over. In that tiny window, he wrote the songs that became the foundation of all country music. Your Cheatin' Heart, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, Hey Good Lookin'. He had a lonesome, haunted voice that carried all the pain in the world and wrote with a piercing honesty that has never been matched. He was country music's first true superstar and its first great tragedy. Racked by chronic pain, alcohol, and morphine, Hank Williams died in the back seat of his Cadillac on New Year's Day, 1953, being driven to yet another show. He was just 29 years old, and in dying so young, he became immortal. Every star on this list measured themselves against him and knew they were chasing his ghost. These were 25 more voices that once came out of every radio in America, that filled the Opry and the honky-tonks and the farmhouse kitchens of a whole generation. The world decided who its legends would be and left most of them off the list. But turn on a country station tonight out there in a truck or a kitchen somewhere and you will still hear them. They never really left. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and watch the next video above.